Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Securing the Digital Payment Ecosystem. This webinar is brought to you by Express Computer, powered by IBM. I'm Sudipta Dev, Senior Associate Editor with Express Computer. The pandemic has pushed most Indians to embrace digital payments as cash was perceived as a potential carrier of the virus. As per RBI, digital payments are expected to jump to 1.5 billion transactions a day in the next 4 to 5 years. At the same time, consumers are choosing convenience over security, as nearly half of the Indian respondents, almost 47%, said that they use the same credentials across online accounts. With convenience comes risk. As the number of users and digital transactions increase, so do the cybersecurity risks like online fraud, data theft, and malware or ransomware. This will test the existing security and fraud control frameworks extensively. As a leader responsible for securing these digital payments, how do you ensure early detection and prevention of fraud as digital payments skyrocket? Enable hassle-free, fast and easy payments while ensuring robust security, establish and enhance customer trust, fulfill RBI security guidelines and other compliance requirements, create a highly secure and efficient digital payments ecosystem. To discuss all this, we are joined by Mr. Tushar Haralkar, Security Software Technical Sales Leader, IBM Technology Sales, India, South Asia. Tushar brings over 19 years of experience across business consulting, project delivery, and pre-sales experience, all in the cybersecurity domain. Before I hand over to him, I'll go over the webinar information. This is an audio and video webinar being broadcasted live and will be available as on demand. We will have polls in between the webinar. I request you all to participate in the same. We will have a round of Q&A at the end of the webinar. Please send in your questions anytime. If you face any technical issues, please try to refresh your browser or else reach out to our team using the same questions text box. If any of your questions are unanswered, we will connect with you over email to answer the same. There is a survey form. This will appear in your browser once the webinar ends. We sincerely appreciate your feedback. So that's all from my side now. Without taking any more of your time, I invite Tushar to take the session forward. Over to you, Tushar.
Thank you. I will just quickly share my screen. Great. Thank you so much. Welcome all, and I hope all are doing fine. Stay safe, stay healthy. So today I'm going to talk about a very pertinent topic. We all are purchasing online, right? And in a digital world, the challenge is how do we know, is it really a legitimate user or a bot or a fraudster, right? It's very difficult to determine that, right? So I'm going to share how do we secure the digital payment ecosystem, right? So let's look at some of the statistics. And this is the source from NPCI, where we have seen 5.5 lakh crore across 2.8 billion transactions in UPI in June 2021, right? And what we have seen from an Indian context is that 71% of the Indians are concerned about the scams and frauds that are happening because of COVID, right? There are a lot of fraudulent schemes that are going on and a lot of users are becoming victim of that, right? 49% of the Indians are most concerned about UPI payment links, like bit.ly links, right? They're hard to know which actual link is, right? So bit.ly links and fake UPI links, they are victim of those kind of, fake links. And then, of course, 42% of the Indians are concerned about vulnerability to fraud. And then 36% are concerned about privacy of data, which is so important, right? There is going to be data privacy law, which is going to be similar to GDPR. And there are huge fines associated, like 15 crores if we are not compliant, right? So as a consumer, they are concerned about how their PII data is being taken care of. And this is again a survey done by Morning Consult, right? And then some of the numbers again, which is again a survey done by ACI worldwide, and you go is that we see an increase, significant increase in the suspected fraudulent digital transactions, especially originating from India, and also a significant increase for the victims, especially doing online transactions, right? And then there is definitely an impact in terms of the scams that are happening as part of the identity theft, right? Credentials are getting compromised, and it's actually increasing year on year, right? So that's the statistics that we see today from the different surveys that have been done. But we would like to hear from you in terms of what is that from a different attack perspective you see right today from your experience perspective. So we'll just run a short poll here and then get your views.
Thank you, Tushar. I will read out the question for our audience. What types of incidents are you seeing being attempted the most? The four options are digital wallet account hacks. The second option is identity thefts, phishing, and fake payment links. I'll read out the question again. What types of incidents are you seeing being attempted the most? I request our audience to please select one of these options so that Tushar can give his insights. The digital wallet account hacks, identity thefts, phishing, and fake payment links. Okay, so these are the various responses. Tushar, what do you think about it?
Yeah, thanks. I think definitely phishing will never go. It's going to be there. I think this survey really is in line with what the statistics are, right? I think phishing is the most common attack. And apart from that, we do see a lot of improvised attacks, right? A lot of new attacks, right? But definitely phishing is rated as highest, and it really makes sense, right? So thanks for the vote. I think, in my later slides, I will talk about it in terms of how do you really take care of those kind of attacks, right? So moving on, what this tells you is that while we want to grow our business online and we want to make sure that we give convenience to our customers, it's also important to balance that convenience with security, which means that you need to have security controls to manage the risk of that convenience, right? And the security should not really hamper the user experience, which means that I should not be flooded with a lot of two-factor authentications or a lot of questions, which will really hamper my buying process, right? It should be invisible, right? It should be there, but it should be invisible, right? So how do you really balance that user experience and security, and then as an outcome, grow your business exponentially by onboarding more and more customers, right? So that's the goal. But what we are seeing today is that the traditional authentication methods that we have is really not enough to build that digital trust. And the reason is something which is username passwords are getting compromised. Just now we saw a survey where due to phishing attacks, the username passwords are getting compromised, right? So most of the time, organizations are going to check, oh, Tushar's username password is correct, so he is a genuine user. But we do not know if it's really phished or is it really genuine, right? So that can be compromised. Something you have, which is your device, right? Generally, organizations also look at, oh, Tushar is coming from a registered device. That means he is Tushar. Maybe Tushar's device is compromised. Maybe there is a malware sitting on my device and trying to spoof the device, right? Organization will just look at it's a registered device, all good, but it could be spoofed, right? Third is something you are, which is a biometric or a fingerprint. My fingerprint copy can also be stolen. Maybe my location from where I am logging in can be spoofed, right? So what it tells us is that this traditional methods of verifying if it's really Tushar or somebody else can be compromised, right? So how do we really solve this problem? So we need to look at it holistically, right? We need to look at it from a 360 context perspective, right? So we should not only look at something you know, something you have, or someone you are, or somewhere you are, right? You need to look at holistically and determine the risk, right? And see, depending on the risk, what action to take, right? If it's really a high risk, maybe you want to block that transaction. Maybe if it's a medium, maybe you want to do a step up like a two-factor authentication, or maybe if it's low, then maybe you just want to allow that transaction to go through, right? So you need to look at all the aspects. And based on my conversations with different customers, they are also looking at device binding, but device binding is more just one aspect of it, right? It does not really cover the whole 360-degree aspect of it, right? Because as I said, even if you look at if the customer is coming from a registered device, the device itself can be compromised, maybe due to a malware, or maybe if there is an overlay attack which has happened. There can be a lot of aspects to the device compromise as well, right? The third aspect that we need to also look into is the activity of the user, right? So, for example, I as a customer, I am buying on an average, 5,000 rupees. I'm purchasing something of 5,000 rupees, or maybe monthly, right? But suddenly my activity says that I'm purchasing like maybe more than 50,000, right? Which is not my normal behavior, right? Which could be an anomaly. That's not me, right? So that aspect also needs to be looked at. Then you need to also look at the environment from which I'm logging. Maybe let's say I'm traveling, I'm on an airport, right? I'm connected to some free Wi-Fi, right? Which could be configured on open networks, which means there is a chance that there could be a man in the middle attack because I'm connected to some free Wi-Fi and that Wi-Fi is not secure, right? So there could be potential man in the middle attack, right? So you need to look at that aspect as well. And last but not the least, behavioral aspect, behavioral biometrics also becomes very important. So today, if we have to identify if it's really a legitimate user or somebody else, how do we do it, right? One of the ways traditionally we have been doing is in banking or any other transaction that we do is OTP comes over email or SMS. But we all know the OTPs can also be compromised, right? So if I have an SMS listener on my mobile, it can steal my OTP and send it to command and control center, right? Send it to the fraudster. So my OTPs can be compromised. So how do you really identify? Email and SMS OTP is just one of the aspects, but those methods are also getting compromised. So one of the other aspects that we are seeing is behavioral biometrics, which means that the way I, as a customer of yours, when I interact with your application, the speed at which I type my password, the time that I take to move from one key to another key, the way I move my mouse, you understand my behavioral pattern. And basis on that, just basis on the username password that I enter, you determine that, yes, this is Tushar or maybe this is somebody else, just basis on the username password that I type, right? And I will show you a live demo of how that really works. But that's really something organizations are looking at, where I do not need to carry any token. I do not need to carry my mobile. Just with the way I really interact with your application, you are able to determine that it is either me or somebody else, right? So that becomes very, very important, behavioral biometrics, right? So you need to look at building that trust onto the digital channels by looking at all of this context, right? And not just relying on one context. So what that also tells you is that a lot of fintechs, a lot of banking, insurance, there are a lot of customers. So you may want to really look at categorizing your customers into three different buckets, right? One is guest users, right? Like they come in, they do one-time purchase and they go. They do not leave many details, like they do not share their PII data. They just do the transaction and they go away, right? Anonymous, right? They're like guest users. The second category of users is high-risk users, right? Which is potentially new users who are trying to enroll to your application or to your application to buy your products and services. Now, you want to really look at, before onboarding them, are they really true customers, or are they fake customers, right? Or are they or there is a bot or somebody else, right? And the third is trusted, which is your existing customers, right? Your enrolled customers. Now, with these different categories, how do you decide which user you're going to allow into your circle of trust, right? So let's look at these three categories. Like, as I said, guest user is one-time user. You may really not want to profile this type of users because they just come once and then they go. The second category of users is where they actually come to your application to buy some products and services, they register. But here, you want to make sure that their experience is frictionless, right? First, number one, you want to make sure that you are asking very minimal details to them as part of their enrollment. And the second, while they're enrolling, you're also able to determine that the location, the phone number, right, the device, email, the time that they're spending on the page. It could be, so if I am a legitimate customer, I will actually fill up all the details, right? I'll take some time to fill it, right? So all of these aspects need to be looked at, in a very, in such a way that it is not a hindrance to the customer, right? And then if you look at the aspect of if a customer is really giving maybe a location, which could be a blacklisted country, or maybe he's using a prepaid mobile, or maybe his email domain is suspicious. Typically, when a bot or a fraudster uses, he will do a copy paste, right? And hence the time which is spent on the page will be too short. So these are some of the aspects using which you can determine that this is really not a genuine customer, right? So you need to have the ability to really onboard these customers and bring them into your circle of trust basis on the intelligence that is given by the solution, right? That's the second aspect of it, right? And the third is, of course, your existing customers, which is your trusted, your enrolled customers. Now, there could be a possibility, as I mentioned, right? Even if they are your existing customers, their username password could have been compromised, maybe due to a phishing attack, a malware attack, identity theft. It could be a lot of reasons, right? The device also could be compromised. So it is also important, even if they are your existing customers, you need to really know, you need to have visibility in terms of if what they are claiming is what they are, right? So those are the aspects that you need to also look at, even if they are your registered customers, right? So in summary, what we are saying is that from a customer standpoint, right? So I as a customer, right? I want to basically make sure that, do I trust the brand from which I'm going to buy the products and services, right? Second is how are you controlling my data? How are you controlling my privacy? How are you controlling my financial data, my personal data, my demographic data, and all of that, right? And second is my account safe, right? How do I make sure that my account is maybe having some kind of a two-factor authentication or some security that, that will help me to give a comfort level that my account is safe? And how do I, quickly access my account, right? Seamlessly, right? I need to move seamlessly from one product to other product without having to give too many user IDs and passwords. I need to have a very seamless access when I move from your different products and services. I need to have the ability to do single sign-on, right? And then, of course, I need to have the ability to also get notified if somebody else is using my username and password, right? And then maybe, if I want to buy certain products and services, then I should be able to do it really very easily, right? I should be able to maybe just give my first name, last name, and email address. That's it. And I should be able to create my account, right? So that's how, frictionless or easy it should be, right? So that's from a consumer perspective, right? But when you look at from an organization perspective like yours, right? So there is a mix of audience we have here, right? From BFSI, FinTech. So a CISO or a CIO will always have this concern of how do I balance my user experience and security, right? That's always going to be a concern. IT leaders who are working closely with the developers want to make sure that how do I, have my go-to-market very quickly? How do I launch my application very quickly with some very exciting features, right? Which the customers can go and buy in terms of the products and services. How do I launch my app very quickly while maintaining the security aspect as well, right? And the line of business, of course, are concerned about how do I onboard more and more customers onto omni-channel, especially the digital channels, and grow my business, right? And then from a privacy officer perspective, the concern is how do I make sure I take care of my customer data? I am compliant to the different regulations like data privacy law, PCI DSS, so on and so forth, right? So that I maintain my brand reputation and so on and so forth, right? So these are the key stakeholders' concerns that we keep on hearing when we talk to these executives. But we just want to also hear from you. What is that you have from an experience perspective. We would like to hear that, and hence we'll just take a pause and have a poll and understand that.
I'll read out the poll question. What is your biggest challenge in securing your digital payment ecosystem? The options are balance user experience and security, preserve customer data privacy, adhere to regulatory requirements, lack of visibility into emerging threat or fraud landscape. I request the audience, please select one of the options for Tushar to give his insights. The question I'll repeat again. What is your biggest challenge in securing your digital payment ecosystem? And the 4 options are right there before you. Please select one of them. Okay. Can we have the results? All right. Tushar,
thanks. Interesting. I think definitely, lack of visibility into the emerging threats, right? That's really the number one. And how do you really balance user experience and security so that you can onboard more and more customers? So definitely, I think you all need to talk to us, and we can help you on how do you really address these challenges, right? So thank you so much for that poll. Really appreciate. So what I will do is I'll shift the gears now, and I will move on to a quick demo. Okay. So what we are going to see now is basically, few of the use cases, right? I did speak about behavioral biometrics, right? So let's look at a scenario of how, without using any second factor authentication, Trust Me Bank, which is powered by IBM Verify solution, is able to determine if it's really Tushar or if it's maybe somebody else, right? So this is a fictitious bank, and we have integrated our solution into it. I'm gonna just, so I'm logged in, and I can see some balance. I can transfer money, right? This is the customer view, right? This, as a customer, I log into the bank. But now let's look at behind the scenes what Trust Me Bank has got visibility into. So one of the poll that we just ran, you said lack of visibility, right? And that's precisely what we give here, right? So if you see behind the scenes, right, what we have told you is that look, the device from which Tushar came is not infected. The device is not spoofed. He is not coming from an emulator, right? Our fraud consortium data has said that in it looks all good. There is no IP velocity issues. And the session also looks clean. The location, IP address, everything looks good. It's all looks good, right? And from an identity perspective, it's really a true user, right? It's really Tushar, right? And all the other patterns in terms of the way I've typed the password and everything looks good, right? Now, if I basically now do a copy paste, right? So let's see what happens, right? So if I maybe just type that password in a document and then try to open it, let's see what happens. If I do a copy paste, just like the way typically a fraudster would do, right? So this is my username, and this is my password, right? Now the username and password is the same, which you just saw, which I gave. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just now copy paste it and see what happens, right? Will the system really determine, despite the fact that it's same, will the system really determine if it's me or somebody else? All right. So now you see, I'm not able to really, log in and see anything. Now let's see. So as a customer, I see, oh, something has gone wrong, right? Maybe some message, right? But behind the scenes, what it has told you, right, that it is non-trusted. And why it is non-trusted? Why is because despite the device is clean, right? It's a registered device. Despite the fact that the session also looks clean, I see that the probability of true user is low because it's not the same pattern, right? It's not the same pattern. Now, what this also means is that the system just does not rely on this, right? So there could be a possibility that, maybe my mood is not same and I am not typing the speed at which I type my password as always, right? It is quite possible, right? So that does not mean that it will not allow you to log in. What it will also do is, it will also look at other parameters, the device, the session, and then basically determine the risk score, right? And if that risk score is within the threshold, then maybe it will still allow it, despite the fact that the pattern is, my typing pattern is a bit changing, right? So that really is also not impacting your user experience, because the best part of the solution is that it just does not rely on one parameter, right? It looks at other aspects as well, right? And that's the beauty of behavioral biometrics. You do not need any two-factor authentication. Just by the basis of the way I interact with the application, it is able to determine if it is Tushar or it is somebody else, right? Now, if I look at the second use case, right, which is around bot detection, right? Now let's look at the bot detection part of it. I'm again giving the same user ID and password, and let's see what happens. Okay. Now what has happened is, for a bot, what it is doing is it is allowing to see the balance, right? But the moment the bot is trying to take the money out of the bank, which is transfer money, he's not able to do that, right? So that's how the risk has been configured, right? So if you see behind the scenes, what has actually happened is, from a device perspective, it has determined that it's not really matching the device binding. It's not a trusted device, and it's also a bot, right? And the movements in terms of the behavioral biometrics is also not matching, right? So that tells me that the risk score is really high, and you need to restrict the access, right? It's medium. So I'm restricting the access by saying that you can maybe view the balance, but you cannot add a pay or you cannot transfer money, because that's where the money is going out of the bank, and you want to make sure that the money is not stolen, right? So you can set the restriction depending on the risk, right? So that's the second use case, right? The third one is basically from a continuous authentication perspective, right? Which means that, let's say I am logging in, it all looks good. I can see the balance. Now what happens is, when I'm looking behind the scenes, I can see that, I'm trying to log in from maybe a new location, which is fine because I keep on traveling. Maybe I've logged in from maybe Delhi, right? I've gone to Delhi, and it's a location change which has happened, which is fine, right? So that's okay, right? But now I'm trying to do some transfer, right? Now let's see what happens. When I'm trying to do a transfer, it is asking me for a multi-factor authentication, which is my fingerprint, right? So I'm giving my fingerprint. Now, what happens, right? Behind the scenes, the system has detected that there is a malware sitting on the device. So there are certain malwares which become active only after you log in, right? Only when you're trying to do a transaction. They are silent when you log in. They become active when you're trying to actually move the money, when you're trying to do some transaction. So the system has the, So the system has the ability to do continuous evaluation of the risk, which means that even if your username is password is correct, you're logged in, and the system keeps on checking. And at a point where you want to transfer some money, the system will ask you for a two-factor and also tell you behind the scenes that, look, this is a malware-infected device, which is a very, very high risk. Because if it's a malware-infected device, then definitely, the money is going to get compromised, right? So if I try to do a transaction, it will just not allow me to do it, right? It will just not allow me to do that, right? So that's the beauty of the solution. It basically keeps on continuously evaluating the risk, and not just realize that, okay, your login password is good, now you can do everything. But at a point where if the malware is present and it becomes active, it can basically stop that from happening, right? So that's another use case. And then I think one of the prominent use case that everybody spoke about is phishing, right? So if you look at phishing, right, which is very common and it's going to stay, right? People fall victim to phishing attacks. Now, if you see, typically, this is how the attackers, right, in dark web, deep web, will have the credentials, right, the stolen credentials, and then they can basically just copy paste this. They can copy paste this like this, and the password as well. They have got the credentials, and they can copy paste it, and they can log in, right? Now, the credentials are correct. Mind you, the credentials are correct, right? The device is also good. But what the solution has given you from the backend is that, look, this was a phishing attack, right? The device looked clean. From a session perspective, phishing was detected, right? Maybe the way I typed my username, password, everything was fantastic, no problem there, right? But it was a phishing attack, which means that the customer was a victim of a phishing attack, and the credentials were stolen, right? So then you can now take an action. If I'm trying to do some transaction, you can basically stop that from happening. If I'm trying to maybe add a pay, or maybe I'm trying to buy something, it should not allow me to do it, because this is the visibility which, as part of the fall also, which, everybody conquers, which is missing. So that's the visibility that we bring in as a value to your organization, right? So that's one. The other thing that I want to also talk about, is the identity theft, right? So when we talk about identity theft, right, we all know that the passwords are getting compromised due to phishing attacks, right? So how about having no passwords, right? How about passwordless authentication? So assuming that my mobile device is registered, right, with the QR code, basically I can then just go and scan that QR code and log in, right? So if you see this, I can actually authenticate multiple ways. I can actually give my IBM intranet ID and password, or I can give my cloud ID, or maybe I can log in if I have a UBT, like a FIDO device, and I can actually log into that. Or what I can do is I have a Verify app on my mobile, right, which I can scan. Okay, I can scan the QR code. Okay, I've scanned this QR code using my mobile, and then I'm just logged in, right? I have not put any passwords, right? So what happens is basically, yeah, there you go. I'm logged in without any password. So the hassles of remembering a password, you forget the password, you keep on resetting the password, your password gets compromised due to phishing attack or different attacks is gone, right? Once you have registered your device and it becomes trusted, right? And you just use your mobile to scan that QR code, you're logged in, right? As long as your device is safe, it's all good, right? You're basically just logging in. So I, as a customer, I really don't have to remember multiple passwords. My password gets expired, it's complex, and it's really difficult to manage, right? So with this, it becomes easy as a consumer. I just do a passwordless authentication and it's secure, right? Behind the scenes, what happens actually, there is an OAuth flow where I actually determine from which location I'm coming, from which device I'm coming in, and all of that aspects are checked. And only then the authorization goes through, the authentication and authorization goes through. But from a customer perspective, it's really transparent to me. It does not matter, right? I just log in, that's it. It's a great user experience that I see. So this is what I wanted to share from a demo perspective, live, how it really looks like, right? Now, looking at all of this experience, right? Typically, when I talk about the different journey that your customers go through, one is, of course, when they come to buy your products and services, they either do a self-registration, they enroll, right? So as part of that enrollment process, which we keep it as capture, right? As a capture stage, in which typically the line of business, the privacy officer, and the developer is really engaged because they want to really simplify this experience, right? You do not want to prompt too many questions as part of the registration process, right? So it has to be very, very simple, very, very minimal, and it has to be frictionless, right? The way I just demonstrated, where if I'm giving certain information, it should be really authentic, there has to be a way to validate that and then really onboard those customers into your circle of trust. So capture stage is very, very important. Then you really move on to the engage stage, right? There could be certain customers, right, where they do not want to register, right? They may have their own social IDs like Gmail ID, like Facebook. They want to use that. They do not want to really go through the registration process. So you need to have the ability to also give them the option to log in using maybe a Gmail ID or a Facebook ID or maybe a LinkedIn ID, right? And log in, right? And then basically authenticate them, right? That's one, right? And the other is, if I want to authorize a transaction, right? I'm doing some transaction and typically a OTP comes instead of that. And you know the challenges with OTP, right? They get delayed. There are operational challenges associated with maintaining the SMS gateways and all of that, right? The cost and everything is involved, right? How about no SMS, right? SMS does not reach and all of that, right? How about no SMS, right? How about having an app, which I anyways use? So for example, if I'm using, let's say Amazon, within that app itself, I get a push notification or I get a fingerprint approval that are you the same user who are trying to log in or maybe who is trying to do a transaction? And I just say approve, or maybe I give a fingerprint, right? And it goes through, right? I don't have to really, wait for the SMS. I just open the app, the push notification comes. It could be a approval or it could be my fingerprint, right? And it goes through. So how do you engage your customers, not only from a login perspective, but also from an authorization perspective, where you are actually signing those transactions that they're doing, right? So how do you give that seamless or a frictionless experience to your customers is where the engage stage come in. And again, in this stage, we see line of business, developer, IT, right? Privacy officers have a lot of role to play, right? And the third stage is basically manage, right? And this is where, you want the customers to also have a self-service ability, where when I log into your application, I should be able to control my data in terms of what I should be sharing or what I should not be sharing. I should be able to really set up, if I want to secure my account, I should be able to set up a multi-factor authentication, right? I should have the ability to maybe delete my account if I'm no longer a customer of, that product, right? So I should have that self-service ability to maybe reset my password, right? Very seamlessly. Again, when I reset my password, I don't have to really call up any help desk, right? I can just reset it by when I say forgot my password, a notification comes on my registered device in the form of my app, like a fingerprint or a biometric, like a facial recognition, and then that's it. I'm done. I'm validated, and I'm able to reset my password. That's how seamless it is, right? So how do you also give your customers the ability to do self-service? That's in the managed phase. And again, that's where line of business and developers come in, right? Because the more self-service, the more frictionless experience you're going to onboard more and more customers onto your digital channels, right? And last but not the least, from an admin perspective, right? It's also important to get a view of, if there is any fraud which has happened, then you should also have a complete audit trail of what happened, right? Who was the customer, from which location he came, and then you need to be able to trace that, right, from an audit perspective, right? And also have reports, right, which will help you to really look at what is the risk from a customer perspective that you're seeing today, right? It's important to have that, right? And that's what admin is all about, right? How do you centrally manage all of this sitting at one place, rather than you may have multiple applications. You may still do something within the application, but then it's really about how do you really manage decentralized applications, the security within each of those applications. So admin is all about centrally managing all of your applications sitting at one place, right? So that's what, and maintaining the policies around it in terms of, if you see a risk, right, what do you do with that risk, right? Because that is going to determine your customer experience, right? If the risk is really high, you may not really want that transaction to happen. But if the risk is really low, you want that transaction to be seamless, right? So that's what the policies really play a very important role. And line of business plays a very important role there, because that's going to determine your user customer experience, right? Like one of the use cases that I showed was a bot. He's able to log in, but he's not able to do transaction. He can only view balance. Now that's the call that business has to take. Should he be able to even see the balance? Maybe not, right? So those are the things that a line of business and the IT together can take a call in terms of how the user experience should be driven based on the policies that you define as part of the admin stage, right? So that's the IBM point of view. And this basically, this life cycle basically takes you from an unknown user to a trusted user, right? That's the life cycle that we followed, which gives you that comfort of, going through each of these stages and making that customer a trusted customer, right? And this is just an example to show what we mean by capture. So what I mean by capture is the registration. So you take an simple example of Gmail, right? When you register, it will ask you very minimal details. That's what all is about capture, which is registration, enrollment. Then engage. Engage is all about logging, authentication, right? Are you allowing the users to log in using Gmail, Facebook, so on and so forth? And then of course, manage, right? In manage, I can control my privacy, right? Who should be able to comment on my, my Twitter or whatever that preferences are. I should be able to really manage that, right? And then of course, I should be also able to do, as I said, seamless access, right? If I am a Gmail customer, I should be able to seamlessly access my, other services within Gmail, right? So on and so forth, right? So that becomes very, very important. So with this, right, now let me talk about, so the use cases that I spoke about, all of these use cases are getting fulfilled by this one solution, which is known as IBM Security Verify, right? And if I have to categorize with the same buckets that I mentioned, capture, engage, and manage. So within capture or engage phase, we can basically have a simplified registration. Maybe, today, to buy your different products and services, I have a different registration experience. Maybe if I want to buy a loan, I have to give some different details. If I have to buy maybe a car, I have to go through some different registration process. Can I simplify that? Can I have a single unified registration process for all the products and services that I buy? The answer is yes, right? So you can basically simplify your overall registration process, irrespective of whatever products and services the customer is going to buy, right? And the second, of course, is from a single sign-on perspective, multi-factor authentication perspective. You need to give options, different options to the customer that, look, hey, look, it's not only email or SMS OTP. You can also, authorize or reset your password, maybe using a fingerprint or maybe a QR code. Different options that I can actually have to log in, or maybe reset my password, or maybe try to authorize the transaction, right? And social login, as I mentioned, is basically you need to also have the ability to log in using different social IDs like Gmail, Facebook, so on and so forth. And of course, the branding aspect of it, right? And then from a managed perspective, the most important aspect is how do I manage the data privacy aspect of it, right? Which means that how do I keep my customer data secure? And at the same time, consent management is very, very important, right? So as part of the data privacy, I should be able to do a consent saying that I want a paperless billing. Maybe I don't want to get bombarded with a lot of SMS. I don't want any SMS. I want a paperless billing. That's the consent that I've given, right? So if I am trying to buy multiple products and services, I should not be every time asked for different consent, right? It should be one consent across all the products and services that I'm going to purchase, right? So that's how seamless it should be. So data privacy and consent is something which we also take care of it, making sure that the customer has control over his data. He can do a consent, and that consent is adhered across all the products and services. And then, of course, from a profile perspective, we can actually go and add authenticators, right? Today, let's say he has only registered for email and SMS, right? Tomorrow, he wants to add a third-party app like Google Authenticator, maybe, or maybe use our app, right? Maybe use our app, which is Verify. Or maybe if you do not want to use any of those apps, your app itself can also be leveraged by this multi-factor authentication mechanism that I told. What we do is basically we offer you an SDK, which you can just embed into your app. So as a customer, let's say of maybe Amazon or maybe a fintech, which I'm basically doing some transaction, that SDK is within the app itself. So I, as a customer, when I download that fintech app or that banking app, the security is invisible within it. And what happens is within that app itself, I get all of these options of multi-factor authentication, which is passwordless, two-factor, fingerprint, biometric, facial recognition, and all of that. Right? I, as a customer, do not have to rely on third-party authenticators like Google or IBM Verify. I can still use your app and do all of that, right? So that's the beauty of it. And then from admin perspective, it gives you, your administrator, the ability to manage your policies as per your information security guidelines, right? As per your security guidelines, right? How you want to really enforce the user experience, depending on the risk that is available at that point in time, right? So that becomes very important. And then from a deployment perspective, the solution is robust, right? It can be deployed on-premise, it can be deployed on cloud, right? So the solution can be hybrid, it can be on-premise, it can be cloud, or it can be both, right? So the solution is available in all the flavors, right? And then this is just a quick aspect that I wanted to share with you in terms of, as I mentioned, we do not rely on one factor. We look at different raw data elements that you see at the bottom. We look at the mouse movements, we look at the mobile intelligence, we look at the email intelligence, device binding aspects. And then there is a dedicated 300+ security research team who comes together to combine all of this into different aspects like device fingerprinting, device spoofing, malware, phishing, all of those aspects. Like these are different microservices which are built. And on top of that, then we basically have the service layer, right? Which basically takes care of those different fraud, right? Which I think one of the poll we did see that you also mentioned the lack of visibility, which is happening today in terms of the emerging fraud, right? Which could be account takeover fraud, new account fraud, card-free ATM fraud, so on and so forth, right? So the frauds are emerging. How do you really keep a track of that? You do not have to, right? So we take care of all of that behind the scenes by looking at all of these aspects and giving you that visibility, which is currently lacking, right? So that's what is the beauty of the solution, and it's powered by AI and ML, right? That's the most important aspect of it, right? And last but not the least, right? Our goal is, and I think everybody's goal is happy customers, right? At the end of the day, we need to have happy customers, right? We need to have our NPS, we need to have our NPS score, we need to have more insights into the customer buying pattern. We need to have more insights into what is that they like, what is that they don't like, so that we can deliver products and services and increase their engagement, right? But at the same time, as I mentioned, user experience and convenience has to be balanced with security, right? There is no second thoughts about it, because the simple example that I always give on is, if I am onboarding a flight, I will not be comfortable to board that flight if there are no security check-ins, right? Maybe my entire process of going into the airport till the time I onboard the flight is seamless, but I may not really be comfortable onboarding that flight because there is no security check-in. Maybe there is a security check-in which is invisible. Maybe there are some aspects where I'm walking in and the security checks are done seamlessly, and then maybe I may be comfortable looking at, yes, there are some aspects which are looked at, and I become very comfortable. That's the whole theory about it, that user, while you want to onboard more and more customers onto your digital channels, it has to be balanced with security, which is invisible, is what we clearly believe it, right? So these are my coordinates. Please feel, so I've written recently a blog on Zero Trust. That's my LinkedIn email. Please feel free to reach out to me. And then just I want to conclude this with just one last slide, last but not the least. Zero trust, right? Everybody is talking about this buzzword zero trust. So what does this really mean? I think we covered some of the aspects while I was talking about that. We cannot, simple theory is never trust. We cannot trust, and we have to always verify. And the simple analogy that I want to give on this is, with the recent experience that I had was, I had been to a doctor, and then I just relied on the medicines that he gave. I really did not Google and check whether those medicines, what side effects it's going to have, right? I just took those medicines, right? And then it had severe implications on my health. Had it been, I had checked what side effects those medicines have, maybe, those implications would not have happened, right? So that's what it is all about, right? That's the analogy, right? No matter what source it is, you need to always, not trust and always verify, right? That's the whole analogy of zero trust. So when we talk about zero trust, what we spoke about today is just one aspect of it, which is the identity aspect of it, right? But the other aspect, which is also very important, is the data, right? The data of your customers, which you're storing, into your different databases, which could be on-premise, which could be cloud, which could be Hadoop, or which could be big data or any kind of database. The data which is stored on your different data stores also has to be protected, which could be in the form of encryption, or which could be in the form of monitoring, right? It has to be protected. You need to have visibility on that as well, right? So identity is important, as I mentioned, but data, because everybody is behind that data, right? At the end of the day. So what the zero trust framework says is that your data is at the center, right? And everybody is behind that data, which means the identities like true identity or fraudulent identity or bot, anybody is behind that data. From a device perspective, a lot of identities are coming from maybe a compromised device or maybe a true device. They are also trying to access that data. Then the third is from the applications, like a mobile application or a web application. They are also trying to access the data. Then your networks, right? The network from which you are trying to access that data. And last but not the least, the workloads, right? So all of these sources has to be looked up on it, right? So you need to look at all of these aspects and then determine your strategy of zero trust, right? So we clearly believe that data privacy aspect of it, hybrid cloud aspect of it, user experience has to be balanced with security, right? And insider threats. So when I talk about insider threats, that's about the privileged users that you have within your organization, which have got the keys of the kingdom, right? How do you have visibility to that? What they're doing, what data they're accessing, right? What data is getting exfiltrated out of the organization. So all of that becomes very important. So we do have a zero trust framework, and we help clients like you to give you that visibility in terms of what is the current risk in your organization from an overall zero trust perspective, so that you can go to your management saying that this is a risk that we have today. Do you want to really mitigate that risk? Do you want to ignore that risk? Or do you want to still or do you want to still have some security controls and maybe have some residual risk? So it's all about risk, right? It's all about risk. So we help you to give you that visibility and then prepare a business case, which you can really look at it if it makes sense to invest in those security controls, which are must, right? There is no 100% security, of course, but it's important to, secure, bare minimal, the controls that are very much needed, like must to have, right? So we give you that visibility and give you that, insights into the risk from all perspective, right? From a zero trust perspective. So with that, I will conclude the slide, why IBM, because, IBM has been in this business for, more than 100 years, like it's 110 years. And we are number one in all of the domains, right? Most of the domains like a SIM or fraud detection or identity, data, and this is not us, right? This is the third-party analysts like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, all the reputed analysts are saying that we are the leaders in this space, right? So that's what, and we believe for us, the success is not just by looking at selling the solution, but success is the adoption of our customers, the adoption of the solution that they choose to, deploy in the organization is success for us, right? And that's where we have presence in all the industries, not only BFSI, which includes fintech, banking, insurance. We are into all industries, healthcare, telecom, manufacturing, automotive, you name it, we are there, right? So yeah, so with that, thank you so much. And I hope this was useful, and I would like to take up questions if there are any.
Thank you, Tushar, for this very informative and interesting presentation. And we have a poll question now. In fact, the last poll question for the day. I request the audience to please select one of the options. And the question is, Would you like to evaluate IBM Security Verify solution? I'll read out the question again. Would you like to evaluate IBM Security Verify solution? Thank you, the audience. Okay, now we have a few questions from the audience, and I will take them one by one as time permits. And I request the audience to please send a few more questions also by the time Tushar is answering these. So Mr. Nagaraj Ramanathan, he is asking, how do I collect biometrics on my internet mobile banking application? Do I need to integrate the IBM solution into these applications? How easy or hard is it to do? Tushar.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thanks for that question. And it's a very good question. So what we do is basically, as I said, we believe in invisible security. So what we do is, the way we integrate with your application is we have certain snippets, right, which are Java snippets, which goes into your application. So if it's a web application, those Java snippets are within the application, right? So as a customer, I do not have to install any agent. When I go to your application, the script gets executed and the detection process starts. The detection process starts in terms of understanding the pattern in which I type my password and all of that. Similarly, for mobile app, what I do is I have a small library, right, which I give it to you. Your developer basically embeds that into your app, and the final, like for example, for iPhone, it's IPA version. For Android, it is APK version. And that finally gets uploaded into your Play Store. And when I download it, I get invisible security. Again, I don't have to download anything extra. So from an integration perspective, what you need to do is just integrate our Java snippets for your web application and our SDK library for your mobile application. And that's it. And you're done and dusted, right? And that basically then helps you to give aspects to behavioral biometrics and give you that visibility. Now, the question is, how many logins would it take really to understand that? So we yearly take maybe 9 to 10 logins to understand the behavior. It may not be just that I just log in for the first time and it's all done, right? So it will really profile it by after I log in maybe 9 to 10 times, then it knows, yes, it is the same way Tushar types it. So that is also basically done as part of this scripts, the snippets that we embed into your application. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Tushar. And Mr. Nagaraj and Mr. Rajan, they have a similar question. They want to know that you had mentioned in the session that phishing is detected. Now, how can that be detected?
Yeah, good question. So the way we detect phishing is, so there are two ways phishing can happen, right? One is, of course, that attacker, what he does is, he basically just copies the complete site and he just copies the complete site and then basically just changes the URL and some of the aspects in the web application, right? That's one way. So what happens in that process is, when he copies the complete application, our snippets which are inserted into the application also go with that, right? So when our snippets go with that, we are then able to determine, because our snippets had actually fingerprinted what was the original application, what the URL looked like, and what were the parameters within that application, because we had fingerprinted application. The moment a fraudster copies that complete application and creates a replica of it by doing some changes, obviously the snippets recognize that there is some change. The URL has changed, the pattern is not the same, while the content looks same, but it's really not same, right? So that way the snippets detects the phishing attack. The other way could be the attacker really creates a completely different site by itself. Obviously, in that case, we will not have a snippet inside it because he completely creates a new site and maybe just changes the URL here and there and just asks the victim to click that link, right? In that case, what happens is, obviously, because we are not in the application, but what we have a solution known as RAPO, which basically can be deployed on the endpoint. And that basically has the intelligence of the legitimate site, right? So if I am going to a phishing site, which is newly created, right? Absolutely, there is no scripts that have gone into that. I can still detect it because that agent is sitting on the desk, my computer, to really determine that I'm going to a phishing site. So these are the two ways we detect. One, if it is new, we have an agent which can determine the phishing attack. And the other is if the attacker really copies it, we can also look at that because our snippets go in. So both ways we can detect. And the benefit of the agent is we can look beyond the browser now, because we can now look at if there are any keyloggers, or if I'm going, if I have a malware on my device, if I'm going to a phishing site, then it will basically not allow me to go there, right? So that's the advantage. So both type of solutions are available to address the phishing attacks.
Thanks.
I hope that answers.
Thanks, Tushar. And Mr. Dang, Rajan Dang wants to know also, is your solution working in complementary with adaptive authentication or replaces it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So adaptive authentication is part of it. What I spoke about is basically, I would say, if you already have some kind of adaptive authentication solution, then what we have seen most of the time is the adaptive authentication. Some of the adaptive authentications that we have seen is they are limited to certain aspects of validation, right? They may give you visibility like that. Okay, the user name password is correct. Maybe the device is registered. Maybe the location is fine. All of those aspects they may give. But what it may miss is the fraud aspect of it, which means that if there is a malware sitting on my registered device, it may not be able to give you that aspect, right? If let's say I'll give an example of an app, right, which is secure, right, which is secure by adaptive authentication. The app itself has a login page and a password. But let's say if I have an overlay attack on my mobile, in which what happens is if I click on the app, right, as a customer, I will get an overlay screen on that mobile. I will feel as a customer that I'm putting my username password into that app, but I'm actually putting on that overlay screen, and then it will go to the fraudster. My credentials will be compromised. So what happens is adaptive authentication solutions can help you to a certain extent, but this basically gives you that complete fraud element of it, which is currently missing in some of the adaptive. So our solution is a combination of adaptive authentication, and it also brings in the emerging fraud and the threat aspects of it as well. I would put it that way. Yeah. So if you already have adaptive, we can add that fraud element to it and make it complete.
Thanks, Tushar. And we have a next question. It's from Mr. Rajiv. He wants to know, enterprises are looking at device binding for trusting the customers coming on a digital channel. Is this technique enough? Can you answer this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something which I highlighted, right, in one of the slides where I spoke about that you cannot just rely on one factor, right? So today, while I know organizations are looking at device binding as one of the aspects, but that is not enough, because what you're doing with device binding is you're looking at various aspects of your device, like the screen resolution, my various parameters, my OS and all of that. And then you're determining, so if I come from a new browser or a new device, it knows, oh, I'm coming from a new device. But the issue in that is, it does not give you assurance that it is the same device, because what's inside the device is something which is not known, right? The visibility is not there. So device binding, I would say, is not enough because of all of these aspects. You need to have visibility into if the device has any SMS killers, if the device is jailbroken or rooted, if the device has a malware, if the device is connected to unsecure Wi-Fi. All of these aspects becomes important, because even if you go by a theory that, okay, device binding is there, if a user comes from a trusted device, good. If he comes from a new device, prompt him for two-factor. But the visibility of what's happening on the device, if it's really a compromise, that assurance is not there. So I would recommend that assurance part also has to complement with device binding to make it a complete solution.
Thanks, Tushar. We'll just have time for the last question for the day.
Sure.
So we are seeing increasing focus on customer privacy with GDPR and upcoming privacy data protection bill. How can we address privacy requirements?
Yeah, I think that's a good question and very, very important question in the current context, because we are seeing, the kind of fines that are associated with non-compliance. And we are almost daily hearing the news of data breaches which are happened, right? We heard the recent data breaches that happened, right? It's almost there in the news, right? So customers, as I mentioned, are concerned about the privacy of their data. And organization perspective, they are concerned about how do I protect that data. At the same time, how do I comply to the different regulations like data privacy law, India privacy law, which is going to be on similar lines with GDPR, and SOX, PCI DSS, so on and so forth, depending on the industry that you are in, right? So we help you to, address that challenge, right? We help you to really make sure that from a data privacy consent perspective, you have been taken care of, right? No matter how many applications you have, no matter how complex your environment is, we take care of all of data privacy and regulations and consent perspective.
Thank you so much, Tushar. That's all the time we have for today. I thank Tushar for sharing a wealth of information on securing the digital payment ecosystem. To know more, you can contact the IBM team, and the contact details are there on your screen. And thank you, audience, for your interest and time. Please do fill in the survey form at the end of the webinar. It will appear in your browser. And we look forward to welcoming you all in our next webinar soon, and have a great day ahead. Thank you, Tushar.
Thank you.